Hello, 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 and surprise, surprise, surprise! It is Gayle Nicholson here again with another episode of the Summer Spotlight. And oh my gosh, it's Friday and we're doing the Summer Spotlight. How is that happening? Well, because we had a situation earlier this week that we had to slip and slide and make everything work, and that's what we're doing. So, thank you so much for joining us this morning. If you're watching on Facebook, please do give us a like. Say something in the chat so that we know who's here, not just that there are people here. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. We are growing and we would love to have you along for the ride. All right, so today I get to introduce you to a lady who has a particular set of skills, let's say. And she is really good at what she does, and she's been doing it for quite a long time. And I know that there are a lot of you out there that probably could use a little help from her. So let me introduce you to Miss Mary Yamin-Garone. She is a writer, an editor, and a writing coach at thewiseonewriting.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mary. How are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. I've always loved writing, right? From the very beginning, 12 years old on my mother's throat, side typewriter, making up stories. I'm horrible at endings, though. They all just kind of faded away. But, um, and it's been a big part of my life, degree in journalism and writing self-help type things and all in social media even these days. Um, there is a big need for people who actually know proper writing, proper editing, and even more so, how to get those points across to others without triggering flashbacks of seventh grade English. So, tell me a little bit about what people can expect when they come to work with you.
Well, before that, I have to say that you and I have similar backgrounds.
Okay.
I fell in love with writing, I think, at the age of 10, and it's just been from forever after that. And my parents were, my dad was an old newspaper man. My mom wrote poetry, so it was kind of in my DNA,
Yeah.
sort of. And I just love to help people fall in love with writing is the same way that I have, and you as well, you
Thank
as
you.
well.
Yeah, absolutely. So when a client comes to you, what can they expect out of working with you? Say, for instance, I have a book, an ebook that I want to use as a lead magnet. Okay, what? And I don't know what to do. I don't know which version of their to choose. I don't know which version of your to choose. But I don't want to look like I don't know. So if I were to have you edit that book, what could I expect in that interchange?
It would certainly be a transformation
Mm,
from what they give me to what I give them back. Um, it's hard to say how well people write by looking at that. I'm not sure if this is answering your question or not, but the editing would be first and foremost.
mm-hmm.
And if it's an an ebook versus a regular book, it's a little different. But I would also always ask them to do some sort of an outline, even for an ebook, to get some sort of consistency and everything is in the right order. And that's about it for like a smaller version. And grammar is a tough one. grammar is a grammar is a tough one. Yeah, I think I see of a lot of the grammar mistakes that people should really be knowing
Gotcha, gotcha.
what's going on.
I, speaking of grammar, I have a particular idiosyncrasy in that I tend to shift my voice in the middle of something. So I'll be talking about, we, and then all of a sudden it becomes you, they.
Oh,
So
that's different.
you catch that kind of thing, right? And you'd protect my butt on that kind of stuff, right?
I catch a lot of that, a lot a lot of that stuff. I'm amazed at how much how many people don't really know the basic grammar.
Hmm.
some of it, I think nowadays they don't teach that in school. When I was in school, you learned all of that.
Yeah.
I don't think they do that kind of training with that now.
I think you're right. I think, and I went to a number of different schools growing up, and I think there was only one school that had an English book that actually mapped out grammar, like
Hmm.
actual grammar class. In all of the years that I went to school, even through college for journalism, they never once took us through mapping out a sentence diagram.
I was just going to say, when I was in school, it was diagrams. They don't even know what that is
Right.
now. It's and with texting, that doesn't help either.
I've noticed for myself in texting that I'm dropping all of my apostrophes. I just can't be bothered to go back and insert them. And I
Okay.
used to be a grammar Nazi. It was horrible.
I would say I'm a grammar Nazi for sure, and my friends will attest to that. Yes.
Nice. That's awesome. Okay, so what if what about writing? Now, I let me clarify. I know you've written your own books. Have you ever ghost written anybody else's books?
I have not.
Okay.
Have not. I'm a little leery of doing that.
Okay. And it's
And
not everybody's path, but I just wondered if you had or not. What?
I
Go ahead.
I almost did. It's just very hard to, in my opinion, to really, you really have to know what you're doing to capture that person.
Okay.
And I wanted to really stay away from that.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And
Not that
then
I couldn't do it. I just decided that that wasn't something I would like to
sounds like
really.
me in
Oh,
video editing. It's not that I couldn't.
yeah,
It's just not where I want to be.
exactly. Exactly.
So then, how about as a writing coach? What would it be like to work with you in that realm as a writing coach?
Writing coach. I help. Oh, I help them start from scratch, pretty much. It depending on what they're writing,
Hmm.
makes a difference. If they're doing a blog post, that's different than doing like a small social media kind of kind of thing. But most of the writing, I tell my clients that if they pay attention to what I do and what I say, because I will edit and go through them at the same time, that they can't help to get better, because a lot of them don't really know with writing where to start.
Hmm.
And I would get rid of my father used to yell at me because he said I had a lot of gobbledygook in my writing, and all of my friends know what that what that means now. That's a big thing with the as a writing coach, is to teach them how to get the gobbledygook out. And when they do that, I think they're amazed at the difference
Hmm.
in the before and after
Yeah,
with that.
that's an excellent point. I want to kind of expand out a little bit. I used to belong to a writers group, and one of the people that was in this group is now a retired editor, copy editor from the Detroit Free Press, and she was always after me that my sentences were so long, you know, and she was right, and she kept, short, simple sentences, and I was always like, I'm not writing for a fourth grader.
No, well, I'm smiling at you because when I edit people's work, I will put in the margins. I don't know how many times on a page. This is a run-on sentence. You have to break it down into at least two, sometimes three, because there's been times when the whole paragraph, nothing against how you were writing, but the whole paragraph was one sentence. And
Yeah, wow.
I think part of the problem is they don't really know how to stop it or break it.
Yeah,
And it's just their thought. Again, that's the gobbledygook comes into play a little bit there also,
yeah,
um, because
absolutely.
it's words that you think belong or should be there, and a lot of times it's not. I lean the other way. I try to get as short and as concise
Yeah.
as I
Like you
can.
said, the words that there is a distinct difference between the way that we talk and the way that we write, or we should be writing. And
Mhm.
there's an awful lot of right there. There's one phrase that an awful lot of that you would pull out of writing that's naturally just part of how you talk.
Right. And that's the editing part as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
and
awesome
I
stuff.
had one client that by the end of our work together, she was able to do that on her own. But in the
Nice.
beginning, it was like, oh my, no, no.
Right. Honestly, the one time in this writers group, I went, okay, Susan, I'm gonna do what you told me to do. And I went back through and I rewrote something and I just chopped the heck out of everything. No sentence was more than 8 words, right?
Oh,
And
that's good.
yeah, and I took it back the next week and I had to acknowledge how much better what I had written sounded that way. And my whole resistance was, this is, I took offense when we were told in journalism college that we were writing to a sixth grade reading level. I think people are more, smart than that. They're more intelligent than that. But that is the, the mainstream. That's how we take things in. And once I surrendered to that and actually delivering in a context that could be received, because
Oh,
short
absolutely.
sentences, clear thoughts, um, yeah, things got so much better. So, but what you're saying is in process of doing this and listening to you as you critique and edit and go through their writing with them, they will learn for themselves how to do that for
That's
themselves going forward.
right. Right. That's the whole point. And I also think pride of authorship gets in the way
Yeah.
with all with all of those words in there, and then they get. I've had some get offended, and sometimes you have to just say, okay, it's okay your way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not usually, but you have to. You
Is
can't
this the
be.
hill you want to die on?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I see the improvements when they get what you just said and all that. Let go
Mm-hmm.
of some of it,
Yeah.
and they do. They say, wow, you
Yeah.
know.
Interestingly, years and years later, I was working as a coach and coaching other people in sales conversations, and there was two of these little spaces in the sales conversation where they had to tell a personal story about themselves. Um, so that experience with the personal story, I would be coaching them basically, like you just said, all that gobbledygook. All of the more words that you put out there when you're trying to get a point across, like do it
Mhm.
simply, do it succinctly. Like Einstein said, if you can't explain this to a child, you don't know your stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and the more words that you put in there is evidence that you don't know your stuff,
Right.
you
It's
know?
just bloating it.
Yeah, yeah, awesome, great stuff. Oh, let me ask you this: is it horribly expensive to hire a writing coach?
Mm, I would say no.
Well, let's. I'm sure
There's,
that's probably a very subjective way to ask that
yeah,
question too.
there's different levels. It depends on what they need help with. Like if they're writing a blog post, it would certainly be different than if they were writing a book and they needed help. That would be one way of looking at it.
Okay,
I would say I'm reasonable. My rates are reasonable.
awesome. And of course, if people have a project and they would want to find out, what to expect as far as a budget, they should definitely reach out directly to Mary to find that out because, like she said, depending on the project, it's a different level of effort and investment, right?
And I do, yeah, they can always book a call and we can talk about that and see
Excellent.
what they're looking for and
Yes.
how I can.
And in fact, we do have going along the ticker right now um, to reach out to Mary at her email address, Mary at thewiserunwriting.com. Blah.
Blah
Um,
blah.
it's very difficult to read that at the same time as saying it.
I'm used to
Because
it by now, but I get it.
my eyes are like, they's run writing? What? But it is
Yeah,
the Y
depending on how depending on how
one
you read that
writing.
exactly. Yeah.
Yes. And it's very clever. It's very clever. But reach out to Mary at the Wise One Writing and schedule your 30-minute assessment. Let her know what your projects are, and she'll let you know how she can help and what it may cost to partner with her.
And
Um,
there's nothing too small.
awesome. Awesome stuff. All right, now, what if I'm not good enough? I mean, seriously, I
They're always people are always good enough. They just don't know it.
you think that's true?
Hmm.
You do?
When it comes
That's
to writing, absolutely, absolutely.
phenomenal.
I think they're afraid. Sometimes I think they're afraid to put it out there, because they don't think it's good enough or people want to read it. But trust me, that's not the case. Everybody can do it. It may take you a little longer to do it than the next person.
Mm,
You may need help getting it done, but
that's
you
fair
can you
enough.
can you can do it.
That's fair enough. And I think that's always very helpful to have your coach's attitude about it being, yeah, of course you can do this.
Because I think a lot of people are afraid, especially with book writing, they're afraid that particular writing is not good enough. And it's your story, especially if it's nonfiction and it's your story. It's how could it not be good enough?
Right, right.
You know?
Yeah. And that is what publishing teams are for and editors are for, is to
Hmm.
polish it up. Polish it up.
Hmm.
Um, it's very interesting. As you know, I'm sure, one of the things that can hold us back from sharing our writing is, for example, reading really, really good stuff like Lord of the Rings or Dresden Files or anything like that, and you go, I'll never be that good, right? And then
Hmm.
suddenly your own perception of your own writing, which before you read that was probably, hey, I'm not too bad, then suddenly you suck because somebody's so much better.
Right, it deflates you. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you do to help people keep their own keep competition out of their head for one thing, and keep them focused on I'm already good and I'm getting better.
It's interesting. I'm just thinking about it because encouragement goes a long way,
Mm-hmm.
I think. And I just try to, it's almost like holding their hand and stroking a little bit so that, because I know that when I was doing the collaboration book with the other women,
Mm-hmm.
even though I've been writing forever, I was writing in it. I was kind of wondering what people were going to think of what I was writing. And then the editor comes in to play there just as well. It's just a lot of encouragement, especially if they're new to doing something like that, to putting themselves out there. And I know you get afraid back to not being good enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to get rid of that.
The opposite side of the coin for me, and trust me, I go into the, excuse me one second. I go into that comparative, like, oh, they are so good. How many times did they go back through and put things in the beginning to foreshadow the end? And, how many times did they read this book in order to write this book, kind of thing? And then there's other ones where I pick them up and it's just so riddled with typos and drivel. And then I'm pissed off and I'm like, why am I not published yet?
Mhm.
Because I'm way better than this guy. So can that be a pitfall as well for clients of yours, to that sudden arrogance or hubris, like I don't need you anymore, I'm better than they are, but that's drifts.
I've never come across that with mostly women that I work with, that are have any kind of thought like that. If they do have that kind of thought, it's never been expressed to me
Gotcha.
that they thought that.
Interesting. That's awesome. Actually, that's kind of good to hear. I wonder. Forgive the sexistness of this, but I wonder if that answer would be different if you dealt more, if you worked more with men. Is that kind of? It
Maybe
seems
it's
like
been a
more of a
while.
masculine trait. That's
It's been
all.
a while since I've worked with men on writing and editing their book. Um, but I would guess that there are probably some that are like that.
Makes sense. Um, all right. So then, give me a little bit more specific detail about what you do as a writing coach. Just pick one type of writing out. Like for example, an example client comes to you. They're writing their life story, okay,
Hmm.
and they've got bad things to talk about, but they don't want to bring people down. They want to be inspiring and hopeful. And they have no idea how to get that across with this laundry list of here's the stories I want to talk about, right? They've got their outline. What do you do?
I think I would start asking them questions that could help bring out and organize. Although you did say that they might have had an outline. When I did the Resilient Women book,
Mm-hmm.
even though I writing for my, forever, um, I had some issues with how to bring stuff out. And in that case, we were given a certain amount of questions I think to help with what you just said,
Mm-hmm.
to bring their everything to the surface. And that's very cathartic
Mm-hmm.
when they're doing something like that to put all of that to get all the emotion in different places out. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not. Um, but each one's different, so it's hard to really zero in, but I think starting there would be a good place.
That's awesome.
If
Awesome.
that answers your question, I'm
Well,
not
yeah,
sure.
pretty much. I mean, because when I think of a coach, I'm as far as a writing coach, right? Um, I'm not necessarily looking at the editing side of it and going, okay, well, here's chapter one, and here's, 35 corrected typos and, 20 reshifted sentences so they're grammatically correct. Um, but more along the lines of, do you give them, for example, like, okay, go write this chapter and then we'll meet again next week and go over it? What's the process that you're walking through a book with somebody?
That's part of it. The way it's different again. Now it's different nonfiction versus fiction. But for nonfiction, you don't have to, we do a mind map or an outline first, and then they don't have to go in order,
Mm-hmm.
writing chapters in order. However they feel at the moment, whatever they want. Sometimes you want to get the hard stuff over first, so you do that. That's the biggie. And I think outline is really big. There's a lot. We've said it before that a lot of people don't know the importance of that. That's the yeah. That's your roadmap.
Yeah.
That's where it all starts. And I find that when they do that and they have the choice to write chapter 2 versus chapter and 4 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, it's a lot easier for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they're going in order, some of them get hung up. Like they'll go 1, 2, 3, and then when they hit chapter 4, it's like hitting the wall. And they don't, a lot of times, unless I encourage them, they stay on chapter 4 as opposed to putting that aside and then going maybe to chapter 8. And then with fiction, it's different. You really can't do that because you're doing the plot and the setting and the dialogue, and
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to, because we tried that. We tried jumping with one of my clients, and that just didn't, with the fiction, it just didn't
Gotcha.
didn't work.
Makes sense. I remember reading an article about George R. Martin, and one of the things that made Game of Thrones so phenomenal and also ended up being part of its demise, so to speak, is the fact that George R. Martin is the type of writer they call a gardener, right? He'll plant a seed here, and then all of a sudden it'll show up somewhere else. So he had a number of seeds planted in the book.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But the plant dies out. It's not needed in the future of the plot. So it looks like loose ends when in fact it's the writing style, right? Mm-hmm. Which that makes sense for a nonfiction, or rather a fiction book, to be able to, you have to go linearly if you're a Gardner type of writer, right? Mm-hmm. You can't go and do chapter 8, when there's nothing from 3 to 8. You're not that far up the trellis.
Yeah, you could, but I wouldn't recommend that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it does seem like there's a lot of value to there being a whole different way with nonfiction that you can essentially go, okay, here's 12 standalone essays that,
Sort
maybe
of.
I wrote 8 or, and then number 4 and then number 10, but how they line up to tell the story of the book goes in this order,
Mhm.
right? Um, so, I mean, even as a writer, I hadn't thought of that until you brought it up. That from the get go, depending on what kind of book you're writing, there is a different process for it.
Mhm.
And that itself for me would make hiring a coach very valuable because I'm seeing that there's all kinds of little spaces that I haven't paid enough respect to
Mhm.
in my writing that directly point to where I'm stopped in my writing.
Mhm. But the other thing too with the clients, the thing that always surprises me is one of the first questions I ask is, "Do you have an outline?" No, they have a finished manuscript, but no, and I make them go back to the beginning. And I don't know if you've ever used mind map. Have you ever used mind mapping?
Yes, yeah.
I recommend that because it's so freeing versus the stringent outlines that I learned in school. And I had one woman who she came with the book all finished,
Mm-hmm.
and I made her go back and I gave her the choice between the outline and the mind mapping.
Mm-hmm.
And much to my pleasant surprise, she fell in love with the mind mapping because it was so much easier to do. It wasn't, 1, 2, 3, 4, and she just, yeah, it's I think that's the better way to do that. But
Phenomenal.
it
Um,
needs to be done, whether it's before, preferably before you write the book, but
right,
you can still do it afterwards. Yeah.
right. Um, no, that's absolutely great. Um, all right, let me think for just 1 second. Do you have any upcoming events, challenges, anything like that you're going to be doing in the near future that people might want to stay in touch with you about, follow you for, check into, that you're looking at?
I wasn't, but I am now.
Awesome. Oh, can you, that's what this is the question that flew out of my head. Can you give us kind of a sketch of what mind mapping is and, how people can do that for themselves? It's been a long time since I've used that. A little refresher course?
Mind mapping, this one, mind mapping um, used to be on a small sheet of paper. Now I recommend that the authors use a huge sheet of paper, and in the middle, you use mostly Post-it notes, but in the middle, you write down the title of your book or what you think will be the title of your book. And then all of the ideas that you have for your book are on little Post-it notes surrounding whatever's in the center. And then you just go in any order that you choose. It looks a little weird because it's one big sheet of paper with all the Post-it notes, but each one is either a character. If it's fiction, it's a character. It's a plot. If it's nonfiction, it could be each chapter. It's just much more free flowing. Then, especially when you see it, you're kind of like it doesn't look like it makes sense, but when you really zoom in there, it's a much better way. I recommend mind mapping over standard outline all the time.
Awesome. My only concern for myself with mind mapping is that I do have a little bit of an attention problem. And seeing like a wall full of post-it
Oh,
notes, I wouldn't get
what
anything done.
what you could just write on the big sheet of paper if that was a
That might
little
help.
better for you,
Awesome. Well,
because it
Mary,
is a little weird when you look at it.
right, right. And I've seen pictures of it, and I'm like, what are they doing there? Um, just because I've gotta have a clean space, or I get so interested in every little thing, you know.
It also looks like you're kind of painting the picture a little bit more
Nice.
that
I
way,
like that.
and then being just locked into that
Right.
outline stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Mary, do you have any final thoughts for our audience today before we head off into the weekend here?
I'm trying to think of what show ends with final thoughts. Was there a Saturday Night Live skit? There was
Oh,
some
I
someone
think
that
you're
did that.
thinking of Stuart Smalley's. I can't remember, but he would look in the mirror and um, give himself affirmations. Yeah, I'm, oh God, I can't remember. I didn't watch SNL during those years. It wasn't
Oh,
nearly as good as it was before that.
oh,
But
I know.
God, anyways, yeah, there's got to be. Oh, it was something like Deep Thoughts with Stuart Smalley, and
Yes.
he would always be like, I'm good looking, I'm healthy, and gosh darn it, people like me, kind of thing. That was the gosh darn it, people like me. Yeah. So yeah, what are your final thoughts?
But I have that written down because it says, believe it or not, many self-proclaimed non-writers often become bestsellers. And the reason why is like you, they had something valuable to say,
Nice. All right.
whether it's a book, a blog post, you have
And,
something valuable to say.
right. And also I would add on to that, and don't ever forget that some of the best things that we've seen happen in the last 30 years were done by people who didn't even start until they were over 50.
Mhm.
Right?
Never too late.
Never too late. All right. Thank you so much for being with me
My
today,
pleasure.
Mary. I appreciate it very much, and bless you with everything that you're up to right now. For all of our viewers, please go email Mary at the YSONE writing.com and schedule your 30-minute assessment call. If you've got a big project or a book to bring to the world, there is no shame in asking for some help to have it received better.
Yep.
All right, everybody, have a great week, have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next week here on the Summer Spotlight. Bye.
Bye.
When you open energy work makes that recovery progress so much faster. That recovery is possible. You do not have to live as a victim until your last days. You have unbelievable strength, and I know that because you're still here. Do you want to create something completely unrecognizable with your life?